Hello, and welcome to the Permission to Breathe podcast, a transformative space dedicated to providing a sanctuary where you can inhale deeply and exhale freely, embracing your grief journey unapologetically. I am your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, here with you every Monday to offer comfort, guidance, and hope. Together we'll navigate this path, finding moments to pause, reflect, and breathe. Let's begin this journey side by side. Are you grieving and feel like you're struggling alone? You don't have to walk this path by yourself. Book a virtual session with Dr. Tammy Isaac at Breathe Grief Counseling Center. Visit us online at www.breathegriefcounselingcenter.com. Dr. Isaac will help you put your emotions into words. She'll help you reduce the feeling of isolation. She'll help you understand that everyone grieves differently, and also help you prevent unhealthy coping mechanisms. Take control of your life with world-class counseling sessions today with Dr. Tammy Isaac. This episode is an overview of grief. It explains that grief is a natural and personal response to loss. It emphasizes that grief can manifest in various forms such as anticipatory or complicated grief, and highlights that each person experiences grief differently. In this episode, it will encourage individuals to allow themselves time and space to feel and process their emotions, which may include sadness, anger, guilt, or even relief. In this episode, the listeners will be reassured that seeking for help is normal and essential. Let's get started. Hey guys, Dr. Isaac here, and today we're going to be talking about understanding grief, just having some general understanding about what grief is. So let's get started. So what is grief? Grief is a natural and deeply personal response to loss. Whether it's the loss of a loved one, a significant life change, or a personal setback, grief is a complex emotion that affects us all differently. You often hear me say, or will often hear me say, how grief is complex and it is deeply personal, and how you go through that grief will definitely be related to how connected you are to that person, place, or thing. And I always say that grief is not just somebody who has died, but like I said today, it can be a setback. It can be a significant life change, whatever that may be that you have this deep connection to, it will bring about a deep sorrow. Also, grief is a journey, right? It's not just something, hey, I'm going to shoot over to the store and be right back, right? Grief is not like I'm just going to go through this and that's it. It's not. It's life-changing, and it's a process, and you just don't swiftly do it. There's just no way that you can do that. And it also will bring about a wide range of emotions. And because of that, it's important to understand that these feelings are a normal part of the grief process, as well as the grief healing process. So you'll feel a plethora of emotions. And I know many people are not in favor of feeling certain emotions, especially the ones that grief will bring about: tears and sadness and heartbreak, vulnerability. A lot of people don't like to express those, but grief will make you. And if you don't allow it to run its course for the journey, it will have some physical effects on your body. So let's talk about what to expect. So grief is not a one size fit all. Okay. Can't just give me that rumpa and we're going to throw it on. Everybody's grief journey is unique. So I just said that grief is natural, deep, and personal, right? So if it's personal, then that means that the grief journey that I will go on is going to be unique, right? It's going to be unique to me, unique to the situation, unique to the bond that I have to what I've lost. And you must know that there's no right or wrong way, basically, how to navigate that grief. Now, when I say that, I want to express that there are some unhealthy coping mechanisms and ways that you can go through grief. But when I'm saying that there's no right or wrong way, I'm saying there's no set rule guide that says that you go left and you go right and then you turn around and do 3 cartwheels and then you do that to go through the journey. Everybody's journey, everybody's process will look very much different because grief is personal and it is unique to your situation. So that's why I say there's no right or wrong way to grieve. You may feel a wider range of emotions, like I mentioned earlier. And it's important to remember that it's a normal process of the journey, but also it's important to know that these feelings can change from day to day or even moment to moment. So while today you may feel depressed and tomorrow you may feel angry, or even in the next moment, you may be feeling a bit of denial or a little bit of anxiety and stress. And then in the next moment, you're like, okay, I mean, they're dead and gone, or I don't have any more. I'm going to make it. Right. You can fluctuate between emotions. And it's normal to feel sad, angry, confused, guilt, or even some type of relief, because these emotions are all a part of the grieving process. And sometimes I tell people it will make you feel crazy. And you'll be like, oh my God, I think I'm losing it. But it is the natural flow of all of the emotions that you are feeling as you go through this journey of living out the grief process that you are experiencing. So expect to have a plethora of emotions. Expect maybe not to feel normal or like yourself, because you're going to probably feel emotions that you don't normally feel, because there are a lot of emotions that we don't allow ourselves to feel. Right? We shut the door down. We close it real fast. We draw the bridge. No more can cross over. Only happiness and joy can cross the bridge. And a lot of that we have learned growing up because we have not been given the permission to feel the emotions that we feel. So when they come up, we think that they're wrong, and they're not wrong. It's just we've been taught to never let them see you cry. Never let them see you sweat, right? Dry your eyes and cut that out, what you crying for? You done fell and busted your knee. What you mean what I'm crying for? I'm crying because I'm bleeding and my skin done broke, right? We have to allow ourselves to feel, allow those emotions to cross the bridge and come into relationship with you, and allow them to do what emotions do. I tell people God gave us emotions, right? And they are there to help us cope through the circumstances that we experience in life. And some of those emotions we don't like, but they're healthy for us. And so sometimes I need to release what I'm going through a particular emotion. So we got to give ourselves permission. And hey, guys, we got to give other people permission too, to allow them to express themselves the way that they are. Allow yourself to feel a little crazy until you're able to identify, okay, this is what I'm feeling now. Okay, I felt like this yesterday. Today I feel like this. So you start to become familiar with these emotions. I think his name is Robert Brawlett. He has a quote that says, always let your emotions testify, but never let them rule. What we've been doing is never letting them testify or rule, right? But you got to at least allow them to testify and share and feel and experience what they are there to do, because they are a part of the normal, healthy healing process of what you were going through. If God did not want us to have all these emotions, he wouldn't have gave them to us. And they're there for a reason. And we've seen Jesus share all kinds of emotions in the Bible. And so we shouldn't be afraid of them. Not allow people to make us embarrassed of them, but allow them to do their job so that we can proceed through the healing. The next thing I want to talk about is it's okay to ask for help. It really is okay. Guys, grieving can be overwhelming. It's like picking up a log that is too heavy and you need help from somebody else to help you carry the log. And sometimes you need 6 people to carry it. Sometimes you need 2, right? It's okay to seek help during difficult times. This is why I talk about how important it is to live in community, to live and remain in community so that you can have the support of those that you love and those who love you back, those who will create sacred space for you to be in so that you can experience what you're going through. So whether you reach out to friends, family, spiritual leaders, mental health professionals, asking for support is healthy, bottom line. And it is an important part of coping with the loss, to be able to talk about it, to be able to help shed light on the experience of what you're going through will help. The light that you experience is like having some revelation or some knowledge about what's going on and what you're experiencing within your own self. And then you can share that with people. So then they then can identify what's happening with you and learn how to support you from that place. Right. So let's talk about a few types of grief. There are many kinds of grief. We can't talk about them all, but I'm just going to share maybe about 4 of them. Anticipatory grief, right? So this occurs when you're expecting a loss, such as, when a loved one is terminally ill and you know that they're soon to die. Somebody who may have stage 4 cancer, you know that they're dying, and you start to grieve and have the sorrow and the emotions as if they're already gone. This is called anticipatory grief because they haven't died yet, but you're already having the symptoms of grief. Complicated grief. So sometimes grief can become very intense and long lasting, making it very difficult to move not on, but move forward with the hand that life has dealt you with the tragedy or with the loss that you have experienced. And so what we mean by this is, because I often tell people, I feel like you can grieve the rest of your life in a healthy way. But if your grief have become so overwhelming that it immobilizes you from moving, or should I say, continuing in your everyday life, that you're not able to work, you're not able to function, you're not able to take care of yourself or your family, then this becomes complicated because grief is heavy and grief is overwhelming. And grief can pause us for a moment. But as we move forward in grief and with grief, there comes a time where the weight is not as heavy, and I'm able to, let me not say as heavy. I would like to say that what happens is, like, when I first start lifting weights, lifting a 25-pound, it's very heavy. But after I've done it a month or so, then the weight is still the weight, but it doesn't feel as heavy as it was because I've built up muscles to carry it. Does that make sense? So that's the way I look at grief. It's still very heavy, but I've built muscles that helps me to be able to continue to carry it and move forward and do the work and live responsibly like I need to by taking care of my responsibilities. So if you're dealing with grief in a way that you have become immobile and unable to function, and this has been happening for a long period of time, then you may be in complicated grief, and this type of grief may require some professional support. So if you're experiencing that, if you identify as that, or you know someone who may be in that place, it would be quite important at this point to maybe acquire some professional support. Disenfranchised grief. This happens when your grief is not acknowledged by society. So, such as the loss of a pet, a miscarriage, or a job. So a lot of us may experience this disenfranchised grief because sometimes we think, often we think that grief is just the loss of a person. But no, it's anything that causes us a deep sorrow. And I'll say for myself, when I think about there was a particular job that I wanted once, and I thought I was a shoo-in. And when I didn't get it, I didn't realize how much connected to the position I was, that when I found out I didn't get it, I cried. And I was so sad the whole day. I couldn't function. I was so overwhelmed. And that was my first time experiencing that type of grief. And many people couldn't understand. I had one friend who was very kind, and she was like, I'm going to come get you. We're going to just go to lunch. And she kind of spent the afternoon with me to help encourage me. But man, I was very much overwhelmed, and it did something to me. So when we are connected to something, a deep connection, it can cause some very overwhelming pain. And a lot of society don't often want to identify or acknowledge that we're going through something because it wasn't a person that we lost. What about a pet? I have two dogs that I absolutely love. I dread the day that one of them dies, but I know eventually they will. And I'm going to grieve that. And people who don't have animals sometimes are inconsiderate when it comes to the loss of a pet. What about miscarriages? Sometimes people be like, where they're not understanding because they don't realize, they just think, oh, but the baby was never born. You never got to see it. You didn't spend time with it, all of those different things. So they think that a miscarriage is not something that people would grieve, but surely they do, because what they're grieving is a life, one, okay? Then two, they have spent time with it because they've been incubating that child who is a part of them, and they are one. And people grieve that. And so we can say some of the stupidest things. You're going to have another one. You're young. You can, all of these things, right? So this is just, before I go off on a tangent, this is what disenfranchised grief is. It's usually a grief that society does not recognize as a grief. Okay. And so because they don't recognize that, and people are not acknowledging the pain that you're going through, you start to have grief around not just what happened, but the fact that people are not allowing you to experience what you're feeling about the loss that you had. Right. So it's important that we're careful and mindful when we're dealing with people who have a loss that may be different from what we know and not acknowledge or aware of. Today's episode is sponsored by Let the Church Grieve by Dr. Tammy Isaac, a compelling book that explores the often overlooked subject of grief within spiritual communities. Dr. Isaac combines personal antidotes with theological insights, providing a compassionate framework for understanding and addressing grief collectively. This book emphasizes the need for spiritual leaders to create safe spaces for mourning and guides congregations through the grieving process with faith and empathy. It's a must-read for anyone looking to support those experiencing grief within their spiritual communities. Grab your copy of Let the Church Grieve at www.drtammyisaac.com today and begin the journey towards healing and growth. Now back to our show. So here's the last one I want to share with you before we move on, is cumulative grief. So this is when multiple losses occur in like a short period of time. And then what happens is, grief is already overwhelming, but then it becomes extremely overwhelming because it's compounding each loss on top of the other. One of the things I often teach and share is that grief calls to grief. And so, you could lose somebody a year ago, and then now you lose somebody this year. What happens is the grief that you're experiencing now was sometimes attached to the grief you experienced a year ago, especially if you not have healed from that, and you still have some unresolved issues or concerns with that, right? So grief will always connect with its homies, right? Grief, right? So if grief does that, let's just think about the compounding of grief when you have one loss after another. Maybe you have a family in a car, you have a wife and 3 children, and the husband loses his wife and his 3 children in a car accident. This is compounded grief, right? He has all these losses that he's experiencing right now. Or, somebody, I think it was Mariah Carey who lost her mom, and then the same day, later that day, she loses her sister. The grief compounds, right? It's cumulative. Or you think of someone who lost, I think about the one of the teachers who lost their life in a school shooting. I forget, Uvalde, who died, and then shortly after, her husband had a heart attack and died. And so you think about the family grieving the loss of their mom in such a tragic way, and then now they lose their dad, who was grieving the loss of his wife. So it's just one loss on top of the other. So that's cumulative grief. Let's talk about the stages of grief. So I want to say that while grief is different for everyone, many of us will experience similar stages, and these stages are not linear. And I also want to say, like, I'm mentioning these griefs, these stages of grief by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, because they're well known and most people refer to them. But I do want to acknowledge that these stages of grief were initially created as the stages of death. And what she did was took the same stages and fashioned them into stages of grief. Um, so I just want to make sure I mention that. But we do experience some of these experiences that I'm about to share. We do go through these, but they're not linear, which means you don't go A, B, C, D, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. You don't flow through those, just like your emotions. You flow in and out of these. And there are a plethora of other stages I would like to say that we go through, because, like I mentioned earlier, grief is deeply personal and unique to you, and what you experience may not always be the same as other people. So though we have these 5 stages by Kubler-Ross, does not mean that I will go through all of them. Okay. But we do hope that we get to the last one, which is acceptance. So acceptance, or it can be the first one. It, like I said, it's not a particular order. But when we think about acceptance, it is us coming to terms with the loss, what we've lost, allowing for the possibility of healing. When we accept it, we allow the healing process to begin within our lives, and it's not hindered by any of the other emotional things that would try to impede me moving forward with this new life change that I've experienced. And so we do want to arrive at a level of acceptance to say that this has happened, this sucks, I don't like it, but I'm going to continue moving forward. We have denial. This is a sense of disbelief or shock. They'll be like, such and such died. No way. This cannot be, right? It's denial. It's where the reality of the loss is hard to accept. And they just keep saying, no, this can't be. You're wrong, right? That's denial. And then anger. These are feelings of frustration. They're angry at the loss and angry about the circumstances that are surrounding it. I felt a lot of anger when my mom died. And, some people thought I was mad at God. I wasn't mad at God. I was mad at the fact that she had to die, even though I knew she had to die, right? Even though I knew that, and not that I knew she had to die, even though I know that we all have to die one day. I was angry because this was my mom. She was young and I would have preferred her to stay here, right? So I was angry and frustrated about that. Then there's bargaining. So this type of, or this particular stage is where we try to make sense of the loss. So we try to build up a story of what if and only if. Oh, I should have been there, or I could have done this. I would have done this. Oh, wait, if this happens, like what if? Like we're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to turn it around. We're trying to make it not be right, but it just is. And then depression. This is deep sadness as the reality of the loss begins to sink in. So, sometimes when we arrive at acceptance, we can also have depression at the same time. I've accepted that this person or this loved one died, or I've lost or suffered this setback. But now that I've accepted, I am now really, really sad to the point that I'm depressed about it. Okay. So you can see how you can move and flow through them and maybe experience a bunch of them at one time. Like, I can definitely be in denial and angry at the same time. I can be like, no, it's not true. Stop it. Stop saying that. And then you get angry and you try to fight somebody, right? You can be dealing with those two things at the same time. So these 5 stages by Kubler-Ross is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So I mentioned earlier, and I'll keep saying that our grief is deeply personal and very much unique to us. So we want to know or pay attention to acknowledge that each person will grieve differently. So it's crucial to recognize that grief is your personal journey. Someone may need more time and space to process their feelings, while others may find comfort in just routinely getting right back to work. So I have a friend who lost her husband, and she was off, for a couple of weeks to get everything situated with the funeral and things. And the funeral was that Saturday. That Monday, she was back at work. And people's like, why are you at work? And she found it healthier and better for her that she returned back to work in the environment that she loved, the environment that she was fulfilling her purpose, and where she was helping and supporting people. And so while that is supportive and helpful for her grief journey, that may not be helpful and supportive for somebody else who may need to take some additional time to step back and heal emotionally before returning back into a routine. So that's why I say it's very different. There's no timetable for grief, right? You can't say, oh, I hear people, well, anyway, I was about to go on a tangent. There is no time limit. You can't tell somebody after a year you should be better. Or, you still grieving that it's been 6 months. You're still grieving it's been a year. Like, you cannot do that, because the mosaic that's been built between that person, the place or thing, you don't know all that was put into, all that was given to build these connections and relationships. You can't just say you over that yet, because some of these relationships were built on foundations that are strong and that have been steady, and it's hard to sever. Okay. So we can't say, oh, you're not done grieving yet. That's horrible to say, because there's no timetable. And I often say, and will continue to say, that you can grieve the rest of your life. We just want to make sure that we're doing it in a healthy way. And here's another thing. It's important just to respect to respect other people's need for time and space. And then for those of us who are grieving, it's important that you respect your own needs, your own time, and your own space doing this, right? You respect it, then other people will respect it, because sometimes people need guidance on how to handle you, right? And so once you say, I need this time and this space, you take that, and then they follow suit behind that. But each person will grieve differently. And we don't want to put everybody in the same boat and say, this is how this should be. Next, I want to talk about common feelings during grief. So this is just, remember, these lists are not exhaustive, but these are just some of the popular feelings that most people will feel. So during that grieving process, you could experience sadness or feelings of emptiness. You can experience anger. We talked about that, at the loss of the circumstance or it that surrounds it. We can feel guilt over things left unsaid, things undone. I shoulda, coulda, woulda types of things. The anxiety about the future without your loved one, the anxiety of like, what I'm going to do now. How does this work? How does life look like without this person? The anxiety of having a new narrative in life, right? Sometimes there's relief. I think I mentioned that in the loss, because you have seen someone suffer so long that you want to see them out of their misery, and you have cared for somebody so long that you're exhausted and you have this sense of relief that now they're gone, that this work that you've been doing can now cease. But at the same time, there are a lot of caregivers who do feel that relief, but they also, on top of the relief, they feel guilty because they feel the relief, but their body can't help but to feel that way because the body is exhausted, especially because a lot of caregivers are known not to do self-care. They continue to feel the role and take care of the person while neglecting their own selves. And that's something that they should not be doing, that they should put themselves first to make sure they're healthy, they're strong and well taken care of, which will help them be a more effective caregiver to the person. That's why it's important that as you're caring for someone, that it is a team effort and not just one person doing that, because then they end up being burnt out. So giving yourself space to grieve. One of the most important aspects of grieving is allowing yourself space and time. So I mentioned that a little bit earlier. You want to allow yourself to have the space and time to fully feel all of the emotions that you're feeling, to allow them to process, because they're going to come anyway, but you need to be able to allow them to fully process and move through you, so that, that grief is not just something like you get over, but rather something that you move through. And so when we allow our emotions to fully come through, to fully come, and we experience them, then we're allowing the process of grief to fully move through us so that healing can come behind it. But if we don't allow emotions to flow, then we don't allow the pathway that emotions create for healing to flow through us. So when we acknowledge and embrace our feelings, what we end up doing is we honor the significance of the loss, and then we also give ourselves the permission to go ahead and heal. We honor the significance of the loss. We honor the emotions that we feel toward the person. We honor the relationship that we have with the person, place, or thing. We honor the significance of the loss, and then we give ourselves permission to heal. So when we honor, there's also a space where we honor the one we love. As we grieve, it is the expression of the love that we have for that person. So this is another reason why we need to go ahead and allow ourselves to grieve. It is the ultimate expression of the love that we have for the person we lost, or the place or thing that we have severed ties with. It shows the connection and the vulnerability, the emotions, the feelings that we had toward this person, place, or thing. And this is a way that we can honor them. It is one way to navigate our grief, is by honoring the one we love, by remembering everything that we have shared with that person. Because some people want to do all kinds of things so that they don't remember. I don't want to go there because I don't want to think of that person, or think of this, or think of that. But you can do all of those things, but your memory is not in a place. Your memory is in your mind. And the crazy thing, you will be surprised at the smallest thing that will trigger your brain to remember the person, place, or thing that you lost. It's crazy. Okay. So you denying yourself grieving by trying to navigate your path of the day, by not running into things that will remind you of that person, is not allowing you to honor them with your memory. And even if you do that, like I said, your memory is in your brain. It's not in the place. And there can be anything that will trigger your brain to remember that person. So we want to honor them. And this could be, when we think about ways of honoring them, we could do that. Of course, we do those with, funeral services, memorials, and things like that. Maybe participating in different rituals from whatever culture or backgrounds that we are, but simply setting aside some quiet time to reflect on a relationship, to reflect on the experiences that you had is another way of just honoring them, not running from the thought, not running from the memory, but allowing the memory to come and to embrace the memory, and the memory that brings the emotions. You also embrace the emotions as the memories flow through. And these are ways that we can simply honor the one that we love. And so as we end our episode today, I want to say that it's important that you know that as we experience grief and go through some of the things that we do, that you don't have to do this alone, because grief is a hard work. It is a hard process. It's a hard healing journey. And so when we think about, I watched my mom who had cancer, who was a 14-year survivor, go through chemo, right? And not having someone to drive her back and forth, bring her home, get her to bed, get her medicine and get her food. If she didn't have somebody to do that, it would be very difficult for her to do that, because the healing process, going through the procedure for healing, was very weakening to her body. And so a lot of times as we go through our healing process with grief, we become weakened in certain areas of our lives, that we need the support of somebody else to help us as we navigate through our grief. And so if you are doing this work alone, you should not. You should not. Let me say that again. If you're doing this work alone, you should not. And you need to allow people, somebody that you trust, somebody that you love you, that will create a space for you. But also maybe it needs to be a professional, someone who deals with grief, someone who is well versed in the knowledge of caring for people through grief, and maybe can guide you through the process, to help and support you, so that you're not doing this by yourself. And I want to say that a lot of times it's our pride who will not allow us to allow people into that place. But don't allow your pride to stop you from going through your healing process, so that you can continue in life with this new narrative that life has created for you. So remember that there are counselors out here, grief support groups, your church, there's Grief Share, there's some type of spiritual support that you can reach out to. So I definitely encourage you to reach out if you need someone to talk to, and or if you're seeking guidance on how to cope through that. It's so much information out here and so many people who are qualified to help you to be able to do that. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed the show as we talked about just some general aspects of understanding grief and what it is and what it looks like. I thank you, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Permission to Breathe podcast. I hope today created space for you to breathe and find peace on your journey. I invite you to join me again next Monday for another episode as we continue to navigate this path together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share the podcast. Until next time, take care and keep breathing unapologetically.